The psychology of people who feel emotionally tired all the time. You're not physically exhausted. You slept enough, you ate, you moved your body, but when someone asks how you're doing, the truest answer is just tired. Not the kind that rest fixes, the kind that sits behind your eyes, the kind that makes small talk feel like lifting weights. You cancel plans not because you don't want to go, but because the idea of performing normalcy sounds impossible. You scroll instead of sleep. You say yes when you mean no. You feel guilty for feeling nothing. And the strangest part? You can't point to one reason why. This isn't laziness. It's not weakness. And it's not something wrong with you. It's your nervous system telling you it's been running on fumes while everyone around you thought you were fine. Let me say this clearly. If you feel emotionally tired all the time, you're not broken. You're not failing at being human. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do when the world asks for more than it has to give. This exhaustion isn't a flaw, it's a signal, and it makes perfect psychological sense. You've been regulating everyone's emotions but your own. You've been the reliable one, the one who doesn't complain, the one who shows up even when you're empty. And your brain has been keeping score the entire time. Here's what's really happening. You're carrying emotional labor no one can see. Not the kind people talk about in meetings or articles, the invisible kind, the constant awareness of how other people feel, the mental math you do before you speak, the way you adjust your tone so no one gets uncomfortable, the energy it takes to make sure everyone else is okay before you even check in with yourself. You do this so automatically, you don't even realize it's work. But it is, and it's expensive. Your brain treats emotional regulation like a battery. Every time you manage someone else's mood, suppress your own reaction, or stay calm when you want to scream, you drain a little more. Over time, this doesn't feel like effort anymore. It feels like existence. And that's when the tiredness starts to feel permanent. Because you're not just tired from one conversation or one hard day, you're tired from years of making yourself smaller so other people could feel bigger. Think about the friend who always vents to you but never asks how you are. The family member who assumes you'll handle it because you always do. The coworker who leans on you emotionally but wouldn't notice if you were struggling. You don't resent them. You just feel drained. And you can't explain why without sounding petty. So you stay quiet, and the exhaustion deepens. This behavior started as care, as empathy, as proof that you were good. But somewhere along the way, it became the only way you knew how to exist around people. And now your nervous system is underwater, trying to keep everyone afloat while you're barely breathing. You're overstimulated in a world that never stops talking. The notifications, the news, the opinions, the crises that aren't yours but feel like they are. The constant hum of everything happening everywhere all at once. Your brain wasn't built for this. It was built for tight-knit groups and quiet mornings and problems you could actually solve. But now you wake up to a world on fire and you're supposed to have opinions about all of it. You're supposed to care. You're supposed to stay informed. And if you don't, you feel guilty. If you do, you feel crushed. Emotional tiredness isn't just about big feelings. It's about the accumulation of small inputs your brain has to process every single day. A text that needs a response. A headline that makes you anxious, a comment you have to interpret, a tone you have to decode. Your mind is constantly sorting, filtering, reacting, adjusting, and none of it ever stops. Even rest doesn't feel restful anymore because your brain is still online, still monitoring, still managing the flood. This is why scrolling feels easier than sleeping. It's not rest, but it's numbing. Your nervous system is so overstimulated that silence feels loud. So you fill the quiet with noise. Not because you want to, because your brain doesn't know how to power down anymore. You learned early that your feelings were inconvenient. Maybe no one said it directly, but you got the message. When you cried, someone got frustrated. When you were angry, you were told to calm down. When you needed something, it felt like a burden. So you stopped asking. You stopped feeling out loud, and you started managing everything internally, alone. This is where emotional tiredness becomes a survival pattern. You learned that the safest way to exist was to not need anything, to not be too much, to keep everything smooth and small and controlled. And that worked, for a while. But the cost was that you became responsible for your own emotional digestion. Every hurt, every disappointment, every moment of loneliness. You swallowed it, you kept going, and no one ever knew. Now, years later, you're still doing it, still smiling when you're empty, still saying you're fine when you're not, still carrying feelings you were never taught how to release. And your body is exhausted from holding all of it in. But here's the part nobody tells you. This tiredness isn't just emotional, it's physiological. When you suppress feelings for long enough, your nervous system gets stuck in a chronic state of low-level stress. You're not in crisis, but you're not at peace either. You're somewhere in between, constantly braced, constantly alert, constantly waiting for the next thing to manage. And that takes a toll your body can't ignore. Your brain interprets this suppression as danger, not the kind that makes you run, the kind that makes you freeze, the kind that makes you feel like you're moving through water. Everything takes more effort. Conversations feel heavy, decisions feel impossible, and rest doesn't restore you because your system never fully believes it's safe to let go. This is why you can sleep for 8 hours and still wake up tired, because your nervous system didn't rest, it just waited. The behavior changes as you age, but it doesn't disappear. When you were younger, emotional tiredness looked like withdrawal. You stopped going out, you isolated, you convinced yourself you were introverted when really you were just overwhelmed. In your 20s, it looked like burnout. You pushed through, you performed, you told yourself everyone felt this way. In your 30s, it starts to feel like grief. Not for something you lost, but for a version of yourself you never got to be. The one who didn't have to try so hard. The one who could just exist without managing everything. And here's what's strange. The behavior stays the same, but the meaning shifts. What once felt like protection now feels like a cage. What once helped you survive now keeps you small. But you don't know how to stop. Because this exhaustion has become so familiar, it almost feels like home. This is the identity shift no one talks about. You don't just feel emotionally tired. You start to believe that tiredness is who you are, that this is just your baseline, that everyone else has more energy because they're built differently. But that's not true. You're not inherently tired. You're just living in a way that requires more from you than it gives back. And that's not a character flaw. That's an imbalance your brain is trying to show you. You use this tiredness to regulate yourself, to protect yourself, to create distance when the world feels like too much. It's not conscious, but it's effective. When you're too tired to engage, you don't have to perform. You don't have to explain. You don't have to show up in ways that drain you. The exhaustion becomes a boundary you never learned how to set with words. It's a blanket, a shield, a quiet form of control in a life that often feels like it's controlling you. And in some strange way, it works. It keeps you safe. It keeps expectations low. It keeps people from asking too much. Because if you're always tired, no one can be mad at you for not doing more. But the cost is that you disappear. Not literally, but emotionally. You become a version of yourself that's always conserving energy, always holding back, always half present. And over time, that starts to feel like the only version of you that exists. This is how emotional tiredness becomes a way of life. Not because you chose it, but because it gave you something nothing else could. Predictability, safety, a reason to rest that didn't require you to admit you needed it. It makes sense. It always has. Your brain wasn't trying to hurt you. It was trying to survive you. Trying to create space in a world that never stopped demanding. Trying to protect you from a pace you were never supposed to keep. And maybe that's the real truth here. You're not too sensitive. You're not too tired. You're not doing life wrong. You're just human. And being human in a world this loud, this fast, this relentless, that's exhausting. Not because you're weak, but because you're paying attention, because you're feeling it all, because you never learned that you're allowed to stop carrying what was never yours to hold. You're not broken, you're just tired, and that's allowed.